Hello everyone, I'm Lucy McNeil here at National Geographic headquarters for our Google Plus Hangout. Today we're talking about risk-taking. We want to hear from you, so please send us your questions and join the conversation using hashtag Let's Explore. We're very excited to have join us today astronaut Buzz Aldrin, one of the first people to set foot on the moon and author of the new book Mission to Mars, which you can see here. Say hi, Buzz.
Hi there, hi there.
And we're also joined by world-renowned mountaineer Conrad Anker, who summited Everest among many other incredible summits 3 times. Conrad? Hello.
Welcome. Oh, yeah.
Conrad has contributed to The Call of Everest, which is a new book timed with the 50th anniversary of the first American expedition to the world's highest mountain. So without further ado, we're going to jump straight into the first theme as we're talking about risk. If conquering our greatest fears leads us to feel humble and insignificant, as I know both of you have talked about over the years, about standing on the moon and standing on Everest, then what gives you a sense of significance personally? What does risk really mean to you? I don't know if you want to go first, Buzz.
Well, to me, risk means putting your life or your mission, things that you hold dear to you at jeopardy of losing whatever they are and losing all the efforts that you put into that. And of course, we've lived our lives up to this moment, and we want to continue to enjoy fellowship and the earth.
That's great. Conrad?
Risk is the price of exploration, because anytime we go to someplace we've never been before, there's a chance we won't come back. And this drive for exploration is why humans are where we are today.
Right. So why do you think it's important that we push boundaries? I mean, what are the big risks humans should be taking, and why?
Well, on my end, it's sort of metaphorical risk. I go out there and I try things that haven't been done, but it's our willingness to put yourself out there. And humans are going to have plenty of challenges in the next hundreds of years as we address how many people we have on this planet.
Wow. And Buzz, what do you think about boundaries there?
Well, I think the difference between Conrad and myself is that I've had a big team of people, a commitment, an objective, and a lot of people are counting on, let's say in my case, the 3 of us to carry out the challenge of making the first landing on the moon. So a lot of people are witnessing our every moment, and we need to indicate to them and ourselves a calmness, a coolness, we might call it, and certainly a lack of the cloudiness that comes with fear and panic.
Right. And when you think about risk in terms of what's more important, that you push past fear or that you don't have regret later? I mean, what's the balancing act there? I mean, Conrad, can you give us a specific example of where you've had to do that?
My view is probably 95, 97% of the time I'm within my boundaries and what I need to do. And then every now and then you have to push for that extra risk and judge if those rewards are a benefit to you. So, but I'm compared to landing on the moon, climbing mountains it's a selfish pursuit, and I have just a tremendous amount of respect for the risk that the 3 of you on July 20th, 1969.
Well, one of the stories that I love that you mentioned in the beginning of the Everest book, Conrad, is that you were like a teenager, I think, on your bicycle when you got the news about Buzz landing on the moon, and that your mom had these stories about you suddenly wanting to be an astronaut. Is that right?
That's exactly the case. And we had small black and white TVs, and in Buzz's age, to go from Everest to the moon, that was 16 years, from 1953 to 1969. And as a young person, it just motivated me to engage in school, and had a great multiplier effect. And that was part of the reason we set out last year on our Everest expedition to include National Science Foundation curriculum for 4th and 5th graders, and to pay back that motivation that I got from you, Buzz, and the astronauts.
Well, we knew we were taking a chance, but carrying out the hopes and all the wishes of so many young people who were tuned in. But we really couldn't dwell on that situation. We were pretty busy, directed on accomplishing whatever was in the checklist that we could remember, and making sure that we did the things that would make us proud of having participated afterward.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. What can I ask you? What is the decision-making factor about what is too risky, and how do you know? And was there a personal moment during the course of the flight to the moon that you felt a very keen sense of that, Buzz? And the same with Conrad. Like, what is the point where you think something is too risky?
I really don't think that occurred until maybe we were leaving orbit, Neil and I, in the lander, and we came about halfway down. The landing radar was beginning to feed information into the computer, and all of a sudden we got program alarms, 1202. We didn't know what that meant, and we certainly weren't going to go and open the guidance and navigation dictionary is about this thick. So Neil asked Houston, give us a reading on that. And fortunately, there was a engineer back there who understood that the computer was a little bit overloaded, but as long as it was not repeating itself, we were go for landing. So we had a few more of those, even as close as 3,000 feet off the ground.
And how do you manage that as a person? I mean, what were the thoughts ticking through your brain when that was going on?
Well, we're very happy that we have such a talented, capable team behind us.
But you didn't know what could happen really then, did you? You didn't know that you could be safe.
No, that's why you need trust in people and their knowledge to play their part in contributing to your being able to do the next step to carry out mission success. When we got down to about 100 feet, the call out came from Houston, 60 seconds. That's how much fuel we had left. I was beginning to get a little concerned, but I didn't want to interrupt the concentration that Neil had in flying over a kind of rocky area. At 30 seconds, we were 10 feet above the ground, and I was pretty relieved. We could probably have the engine fail and still make kind of a hard landing.
Right. That's incredible. I also read that when you took back off again, you said we're number one on the landing for takeoff. So obviously humor plays a big part as well in it, I think.
Well, I had been saving up that phrase of something to respond to maybe lighten the moment as we received the instructions, Tranquility Base, you're cleared for liftoff. And I said, Roger, Houston, we're number one on the runway.
Very nice.
And all pilots know what that means. You're turning out and you're ready to pour the coal to the or engage the afterburner, and off you go.
That's great. Conrad, how have you found, I mean, and does humor play a part in sort of the riskiest moments as a way of taking the edge off some really terrifying things that are going on, or an unfolding situation where you know that things are pretty tricky, but it's not going to help to escalate it through being fearful? So how do you use it?
in a risky situation in the mountains means that you're being threatened by snow or ice that is above you that could come down on you. So that's we try to avoid them as much as possible. But when you're when things are desperate and it's really hard and you're making decisions, a little bit of humor is great, because what it serves in a climbing setup is that it's a check on your partner. If your partner still can get your humor, they're doing okay, and it's an important part of it. And we always have these silly jokes, but when you know that you're
like what?
Well, we always try to put it like, oh, it's not that bad. So even though it's really that bad, it'd be like, oh, man, what if we got ketchup on our shirt? That would be way worse. So the moment's always appropriate, but that little bit of humor is a check on your team and your partners so that they're doing okay and you're with that. Plus it lessens the moment when you have to make those decisions.
Right. That's a good one.
Now, sometimes you just don't know whether your partner is telling a joke or not. I remember we were in lunar orbit, and Mike Collins says, hey, Neil, have you thought about what you're going to say when you get to walk on the moon? And Neil said, oh, I don't know. I'll wait till we successfully land, and then I'll think about it. Well, I don't think I would have. I thought about it well ahead of time if it had been my task. And I really don't think I'd have relied on my wisdom for such a significant moment. I would have consulted somebody, just like leaders of big organizations have speech writers. They put their own tone into things, which I do. I've written a good number of books, but I am not a writer, so I deal with a professional, and then hopefully he understands what I'm telling him. Doesn't always work out that way, but
not always. But it's a good way of thinking about it as well, I think. So it's good to have. It takes a village. Takes village.
Yeah.
So I think we have a video question coming up now, which is going to be from Marga and I think Tamara in Yerevan. And the question is about advice for the next generation. Oh, I'm actually being told that video is not working just yet, so we're going to try and run that one a little bit later on. So we'll move to a new theme, and we're thinking about more of a personal idea now. What drives you to take risks? We have Stanley on Google Plus who asks, what pushes you past the fear when doing some of the things you do? What is this inner thought that you really go to when you are trying to push past scary things? I don't know if Conrad wants to go first.
In mountain climbing, you're out there for 10 weeks, and then of that, you might have, there's a lot of sitting around and things like that, but then when it's busy, it's not that immediate. So you kind of keep a calm thought, knowing that if you are nervous, you're going to be using up physical energy that you could then use in other parts of your body and ways to keep warm. And then when there is the odd moment that something quickly happens and the situation turns risky immediately, then you have a surge of adrenaline and you address it right there.
Right. And Buzz?
Most all of us in the early phases of the space program, they were test pilots. I used a little bit more of my head work and chose not to pursue test pilot training, but to get more education so that I could analyze how to do different things. And so at MIT, instead of learning how to intercept airplanes, I looked at how do we rendezvous in space. And back in 1962, we certainly didn't know how to do that. So it was paving new ground. And fortunately, looking ahead, I was able to do the same thing now about going to Mars with orbits that swing around the Earth and then go to Mars, swing around Mars, and essentially come back and repeat that opportunity continuously. So they don't start and stop at one destination or another.
Yeah, that's more of an intellectual risk in a way, that you're making an intellectual calculation about how far to push an idea.
Well, not always do other people understand for various motivations.
Of course.
And they might be a little jealous. They might be able to think you're pushing your own ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's essential that whatever we can contribute to the success of a mission, we certainly like to do so. And sometimes you're taking risks in what you propose because it may turn out to be not very practical.
Right. And then you have to figure out what to say to everybody as well, of course. But worry about that later. All right, we have now another video. We have another crack at a video question. We've got National Geographic explorer Kenny Broad sent us a video question, and he's also asking about risk and adventure in the everyday. I think that one's just coming up now. Tick, 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 tick.
Okay, Kenny, we know you're there.
Come on, Kenny, we know you're there. Ah, there it is. I think it's about to run. Seems to have some big...
About risk in the context of recently falling off the third story of the mountain. And wondering, at least in my life, there's more times where I think I've come closer to saying goodbye to life as we know it, not in the act of cave diving or a hard climb, but actually driving to the dive site or one day the things we do every day and forget about, like about. You think as humans and as you two who work in extreme environments, you think we often overweigh these low probability but very dramatic events like cave-ins, like avalanches, and then underweigh the things that are just common events but much more likely than probably things are. And how can we translate that thinking into other aspects of our life, environmental management, and other sorts of issues that we deal with. Just a thought.
Well,
Okay, could you guys hear first of all, and I'll repeat the gist of it. Could you both hear it okay?
yeah, I got it. Well, yeah.
A little bit.
Okay, so it's about the mundane risk actually the risk that we should be thinking about more strategically, because that can often be the scarier piece of it. And as you saw, Kenny had broken his arm by falling off a scout for a dive site rather than on the expedition itself. I'm just repeating that for some viewers who may not have heard the full question. Conrad.
I think that the risk that I encounter in driving in day-to-day life, in the mundane life, is a lot less than high-altitude climbing. Climbing at the higher elevations on Everest and those type of mountains is one of the most dangerous sports one can partake. And so there's been 4 fatalities this season on Everest. So I think that my heightened sense of risk awareness, because I'm in the mountains, offers me a little bit better assessment when I'm driving around and I'm walking. So I'm tuned in my environment and make sure that I'm aware of the other people, the other automobiles, and I work with it. But for me, unfortunately, life is riskier in the mountains than it is here, and I can't push it away and say, oh, well, more people die on automobiles. In my line of work, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm. It really isn't. And Buzz, and then I'm going to come back to Conrad on a specific issue on that. Buzz, what do you think?
Well, riskiness, I think, varies with age. I remember I was quite young, and I was playing out on a pier at a lake, and I was very proud of the bucket that I had that was full of rocks. And my friend decided he would just push me off the pier, so I went down and carrying that bucket of rocks with me all the way to the bottom. Fortunately, my friend's father came down and fished me out of the water. I learned to swim after that, and I was so fascinated with what you could do underwater that I thought, well, why don't I just get a hose that'll go up to the surface, and I'll carry a rock and I'll just walk down in the water. Well, that doesn't work either, because it's the difference between how deep your lungs are, and that's why when we snorkel, we generally lie rather flat. Now, these are little piddling things, but it's good to remember that you got to do the critical things when you've just shot down a MiG-15 in Korea and you're climbing out to get back to the home base, and you're all by yourself, and all of a sudden it occurs to you you're not climbing as fast as you should, and with great chagrin and guiltiness, you realize you still have your speed brakes out, and that's why you're climbing slowly. That's kind of risky if
that's quite risky.
Pigs are trying to chase you as you try and climb to altitude and head on back.
Yeah, I think they all tend to be lessons that can end up, as Kenny was alluding to, that we can sort of mix and match into real life. I mean, for somebody like you and Conrad, you have to deploy them in very serious situations, particularly. But that actually made me think about the situation on Everest right now, which is talked about in this month's edition of our magazine. And I wondered what you thought, Conrad, about, when you look at risk and then you look at the amount of people that we see on Everest now, and even the most recent situation with Simone Moreau and the Sherpas. Where does conflict resolution techniques come in when you're trying to manage risk when you're on a mountain? I mean, how we talk about risk as if it's things that is going to happen because of the activities that we've planned for and prepared for, and have we planned enough if you're an adventurer and explorer. But what's the conflict piece where you need to work with human capital to overcome something like that?
In climbing, you're a guest in climbing the Himalayas, you'll be a guest in either the Karakoram or the Central Himalayas or the Eastern Himalayas. And all these ranges have people that live there, and they're part of their communities. Specifically on Everest, there is it's designed now, equipped for large amounts of climbers to go up there. It's not the challenge that it was 60, 50 years ago. Rather, it's becoming more mainstream. There's probably 500 climbers that go there each day. And it's a great point, is to look at risk that is out of what you're doing. And for me, that greatest part would be the risk of getting a stomach infection on the easy end when I travel, or the risk due to political strife and someone wanting to be with that. But I've found that in any time that there's between cultures, that if you approach it with dignity and respect to each culture, then you tend to smooth things out.
Right. Yes, that's a good answer. What risks won't you take? Have you ever been confronted with something where you've said, no, that doesn't fit into, there's all sorts of things that are attractive to me about that, but I'm actually not going to take that step forward?
Well,
Sorry.
I certainly have some risks that I'm not willing to take. I've climbed up Mount Washington when I was 10, 12 years old, but now I'm looking a little bit beyond, even beyond the moon. And Conrad, do you realize that Mount Olympus on Mars is 90,000 feet high? So when you think you've really done something, why, just think about wearing the spacesuit and trying to climb up Olympus Mons.
Yeah, that would be good. And also, we need to get the first ascent of the moon, because the high point of the moon hasn't been reached yet. So the equivalent of, it'd be great to get more, to get explorers up onto the moon, just to show that we can do it, and it's that first step, and then making that next step out to Mars. And Olympus Mons is, it looms big in the history and the figure of climbing. Everyone talks about that as the ultimate climb, and it's pretty popular, and we're aware of it.
Well, so. I like to go in the other direction. I've been down to see the Titanic in a yellow submarine with Frenchmen, and believe it or not, Jim Cameron asked me at one time if I would accompany him down to the deepest part of the ocean. I think when he found out the details of putting a submersible together, he found that it was going to be much easier for just one person and not two people. That's okay with me. I think going down to see the Titanic is enough. The North Pole, but I've got to get to the South Pole, and I'm looking forward to maybe doing that, believe it or not, by driving Hummers to the South Pole on a, I hesitate to call it a road. It's really an ice trail, because people down in Antarctica found it just so expensive and the weather so undependable to carry fuel down to the South Pole Station that they're now driving it down there, and it's much more dependable and economic. But anyway, we've been trying to do that for several years, and I just don't know whether it's going to pan out or not this November and December.
It's very exciting plans there, I think. So we have one more question from Donald Pratt on Google Plus before we're going to go to a question from our youngest viewer on our Hangout. Donald Pratt is asking, besides the risk, this is quite a cute one, besides the risks you've taken in exploring in adulthood, what was the riskiest thing that you did before you turned 21? And do you regret taking any of the risks before you were a fully fledged adult? And obviously we're keeping it PG because it's a family show.
Well, I saw somebody else use a pole and put it in the ground and allow them to go up a little bit higher. So I became a pole vaulter, and occasionally, way back in those days, you'd be on your way up, and all of a sudden the bamboo would part in the middle and break, and zooming you into the sawdust pit. Now, you don't anticipate that that's really going to happen, but when it does, there's not very much you can do about it except you're along for the ride.
Yeah, some of the earlier climbs that I had done before I really knew the systems and the rope and everything, and I look back at the mistakes I'd made, and of course their experience, and they taught me to be a better climber. But some of those climbs when I was young and 14, 15, something like that, I recall just getting away with the skin of my teeth and having prevented death, and it really upset my parents. So it's those formative climbs that I went through.
Right. Made you the man you are today.
Have you seen these people that kind of spread their arms out, and they have some cloth or canvas structure, and they're able to come down and fly and around, and a couple of them with smoke coming out? I saw this one.
Maybe you should do one. I think you should do one, Buzz.
No, I saw this one guy. He was going to fly through a hole in the mountain, and I thought, that really takes guts.
I saw that too. It's terrifying. Yeah, it's brilliant, but it's terrifying.
Well, I'm not
shooting is a little bit crazy.
You don't
I'm not
fancy
going
that.
to do bungee jumping either. I really don't have to put my life on a rubber cord. A parachute, yes. I might have to eject, but I'm not going to jump out of an airplane when the engine is running properly. I'd rather come down conventionally and land on a runway.
Okay. Well, we have a question now, which I think is from our very youngest participant today, who is Noah from Northumberland in England. And this is a nice question, I think, for you, Buzz.
You're going to have to interpret. I can see him.
I can see him, but I can't hear him. But
Neither
I think
can I.
I think we might try and play it again. Let's try one more time.
Hey, Buzz, your family place, does your little boy want to be a spaceman too?
Something about my family.
I'll repeat it for you. He said, Buzz, you're very, very brave. Does your little boy want to be a spaceman like you? And I know who wrote the foreword to your book, so I think that's a very sweet question.
Yeah, well, my youngest son did write the foreword to my book, Mission to Mars, and I'm very proud of him for for doing that. He also was a football player, but he's a rocket man. But he literally lights the fuse on the rocket that goes up, and gets paid more for doing that than I got paid for being on the top of the rocket going up.
We'll have to tell Noah that, and then one day he'll be getting paid more money than his dad, who's in that video. I think we'll see how that goes. Conrad, what about you when you think about, inspiring the next generation, as Buzz has done for a lot of younger people, and as you do now in your field? I mean, I know there's a lot of community groups that you work with in when you're climbing.
Probably my greatest inspiration when I connect with school children, and when someone asks, well, Everest has been climbed, we've been to the moon, we're hopefully going to Mars, we're doing all these great things, what's the next frontier of exploration? And I always explain and try to motivate them that it's in the sciences and in the nanosphere, and there's all this knowledge out there that's not found. So it's what Livingston was doing when he was seeking the source of the Nile, Lewis and Clark across North America, and then eventually on to Everest, and then the moon. All these, we've met those terrestrial and lunar goals of exploration. We now need to look into it. And so the metaphorical crossing of Antarctica is finding solutions on how we can feed, shelter, and clothe 7 billion people today, and probably 9 billion by when Noah's a young man and a young adult and a leader. There'll be 9 billion people here. So solving that's kind of the goal, and why I encourage exploration, and why we do need to take a certain degree of risk in pursuing that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, Buzz, anything to add to that before we move into some quick fire questions?
Well, of course, the space program is going to take people from Earth somewhere else, but we're certainly not going to solve the overpopulation problem here on Earth. We just won't be building spacecraft big enough to be able to do that. I think we need to marshal our behavior here on Earth so we can learn how to improve the situations when we go somewhere else.
Yeah,
now, the moon is it requires just way too much to make it hospitable, but Mars is a much better place. Besides, it costs a lot of money to bring people back from there too.
Yeah, that actually brings us to a question in the quick fire round. Would either of you consider living on Mars if you had the chance, even if it was a one-way ticket?
Well, I can answer that. I know what it entails. I know the challenges of getting along with people. That's probably not been my strong suit. It is thinking about new and different and better ways to do things, and I need a big team behind me. I don't like to be lonely. I'd like to prepare other people to do the things that will be remarkable, and I'll rely on my intellect to try and use the experience and guide people into bigger and better things.
That sounds good. Conrad?
I'd sign up tomorrow. So
wow.
I'm totally game. I'm 50 years old. I've seen great things, and if I spent the next 50 years of my life, if I lived that long on Mars, I would love it. I would do geology. I would try to do things. It's not that we would want to be there, but I would sign up for it. And then with technology as it is today, the ability to communicate between the Earth and Mars would keep me close to it, and we would find a way to do it. But it would just be to be that person that took that first commandment to be on Mars. Even if it was a one-way ticket, I'd be like, yeah, let's go.
There you go.
I just don't like that one-way ticket business. I like the positive way of saying we're going to create permanence of human beings that for thousands of years have been here imprisoned by gravity to the one planet, Earth, and we're now on the verge of making a commitment to extend human habitation, growing permanence on another planet in the solar system, and that is a big deal in the unfolding of human history. And I always take the opportunity to remind whoever's listening in that the president who makes that kind of a commitment is going to go down in history for hundreds of thousands of years.
That's right. I think that was an awesome question. That was Jeff Dearman from Massachusetts on Google+. I have to credit him with that. Okay, so we're going to move on to thinking about the future and what's next, really. I mean, where are we in the global story, the risk in the past versus risk in the future? Question for Conrad from Misha on YouTube. Has evolving technology made climbing and exploration more accessible over the years?
Technology certainly has. It's obviously we're great engineers, and there's no mountain we couldn't build a cable car or a road to the top of it. So the challenge and the adventure we get in climbing is by doing it with less equipment and less stuff. So you're creating that adventure and that challenge. But I come back to thinking that the big challenges, the big exploration, the big risk stories in the next 100 years are going to be ones that involve and sort of include all the humans and how we're going to address the next 200 years. And that's a great big unknown out there. But climbing, because it's adventurous and a risk, it keeps that spirit and that gene alive.
Right. Yeah, it's a great metaphor for what we need to do. Yeah.
My choice would be to use a helicopter to go to the top of Mount Everest. I think some of them could do that, but you know, we choose to use the words. We choose to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think that embodies the human spirit, to really tackle objectives, to see that we can do what hasn't been done or what challenges the human adventure and does something that will be admired, appreciated, and sometimes rewarded, sometimes not.
What do you think, what advice would you have, asks Elizabeth Mann on Twitter, for these new generations of explorers who do perhaps more than any other time in history have to think about, you know, the legacy that they leave behind in terms of the resources that we have left? I mean, what advice might you have if they have families? How do they get involved in thinking about these things?
Well, I've certainly talked to a number of people who cherish their participation 40, 50 years ago in the Apollo program. So being a team member, when you contribute what you can as an individual to the success of the combined effort, is really a great treat for some human being to be able to do. Not everybody can be as at the point of the spear or carrying out the big step. Even though it's a small step at the moon, it'll be a giant leap for permanence on Mars.
Yeah, and Conrad, what do you think?
For families and the people that are out there, the spirit of exploration and risk, if you can bring it into your life and bring it into your heart, and on the weekend, go out with your family or friends and go for a hike and sort of get out there and do something a little out of your comfort range. Get hungry, get rained on, get showered upon, so you come back and you're like, wow, that's what it's like to be human. And then willingness to take that on, that the hard work and the diligence and the suffering that great things require, that building that spirit into it will collectively, as Buzz pointed out, that's what we need to get us up there to Mars. Yeah,
there is this sense that, you know, amongst a lot of people that we only have, the younger generation have perhaps more of an academic relationship with nature, in that they can give us all the statistics on climate change, but maybe have never slept in a tent before. So, you know, it's sort of like you need the balance of both to move forward. And I think you two embody that sort of excitement about the world around us and really rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands in, getting involved in it. Is there anything that you want to share with us about any of your projects that you're involved in now, as we start to sort of get a few more questions in and before we start to wrap up in a few minutes? Is there anything you'd like to tell me about?
Well, one thing that I'm involved in, maybe for another 6 months or so, has to do with a law that was passed back in '08 that allows veterans to show the pride that they have in their service when the national anthem is played at ceremonial events, sporting events, that instead of putting their hand over their heart the way most others, we may hand salute now. So not only do the veterans need to know this for their own pride and camaraderie with other people that they see, but the American people need to appreciate in a greater way the sacrifices that have been made. And along that same line, we have 22 suicides a day of veterans because of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm trying to do what I can with my aviation background to provide a simple simulator, airplane flying and small flights to get a sense of achievement, a sense of feeling good about yourself, and don't dwell on your problems. I know enough about that firsthand, because I've fallen into that trap many times.
Yeah, and flipping the perspective is the way out often of these things. That's the way that you can walk a path out, and I mean that is the way ahead. Conrad, what do you think about it in your field?
Yeah, similar to Buzz, I've got a project I'm working with veterans expeditions, and our goal is to take them outdoors and go ice climbing, mountaineering, having them be witnesses of climate change, and by getting them outdoors and giving them the opportunity to live and be in a wilderness where they were willing to offer the ultimate sacrifice for that. So it's been a great program addressing the sort of some of the challenges with that, and then also looking to engage more people in science. I'm a layperson scientist, but the value of it and being able to get young people in 4th and 5th grade, because sooner than later they're going to be science, technology, engineering, all those really core things that are the basis of where we need to be as a nation going forward.
Yeah, and then I guess one more thing. What would you do differently if you were sort of 21 again, starting out your careers? What advice would you have for people, or what would you specifically change about the path that you took? Because I think a lot of people would like to sort of figure out how to get into your shoes and be able to take the sorts of risks that you have. So what would you do differently?
I am a most grateful person for having grown up in the United States of America and having parents that nurtured me in the development, having an outstanding education system in my hometown, taking advantage of serving my country and the discipline that goes along with a West Point education. Then I was fortunate enough to get involved in combat in aircraft during the Korean War. I even was on alert with nuclear weapons on 5-minute alert, and if the siren went, we were hopped in our airplanes and we deliver a nuclear weapon somewhere in Poland or Czechoslovakia. There are a lot of people that were doing that, and people just don't realize that that among many things are the sacrifices that are involved. Then, of course, I lucked out and managed to talk my way into the space program, and that brought about tremendous rewards, not for everyone. One of my very best friends at West Point, and as a fighter pilot, was Ed White, and he was killed in the Apollo 1 fire. So there are sacrifices. There are things unexpectedly that can come along, and some of us weather these challenges and are able to succeed. But we look back at those who also were very talented, maybe even more talented than we are, but were denied the opportunity for the same success that we had.
That's right. Conrad, is there, how would you answer that question?
The under 21. I'm happy where I am in life and everything. I wouldn't want to change anything. If I were to do anything over again, I would have stuck to playing music. Too late.
You can do that later.
Yeah, but it'd be good to have done that. But I'm so happy, and as Buzz mentioned, we're so fortunate here in the United States to have the education system, the support system, and I would. If I could at age 21 realize that it's not about what you take, but it's about what you give back, I think that for me would have been, it took me later in life, and it took me tragedy, having lost friends and things like that, to realize it's not about us, but how are we going to give back to the people that are coming after us, because the people that came before us gave to us.
Right. And then last question before we close, can you give us a sense of who your favorite risk takers are and why? And that's just a really quick question.
Well, mine is a contemporary of my father's, who was an aviation pioneer. He studied under Robert Goddard. He was an aide to Billy Mitchell. He grew up and was born the same year as a real famous aviator. And a book was written about him, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo.
And why was he so inspirational?
Well, he certainly didn't hesitate to take command of other people and lead them on one of the most daring missions of World War II, and that's the bombing of Tokyo, which somehow affected the defense of Japan and made them keep a lot of forces there.
Got it.
But the courage to do what they did, and that's to take off from that carrier knowing that they had been sighted, so that they couldn't return back to the carrier, but they had to crash land in China and take their chances with survival.
That's incredible. And Conrad, what about yours?
Current risk takers, the team over at Golden Spike, they're trying to get commercial aviation to this point where they can land people on the moon. And we need to, if this is going to be viable, it needs to be viable on an economic scale. And being able to do that, I think that whole team is putting it out there, but they're also opening it up to the marketplace and competitive engineering. So I think that a combination of the NASA program that went on, which was very much state funded, to private enterprise. So that that would be like on a big scale. Climbing, there's really talented climbers out there. They're doing crazy things, but sort of the big picture would be this chance to get people on the moon again.
Right.
Well, we've got a married couple that is going to in January of 2018 launch to fly by Mars and come back 500 days later. That's a very challenging. And the title of the program is Inspiration Mars.
Wow.
And I think that's going to do much to lift the spirits of those of us who seek further and further goals in our space program and extension of humanity outward.
It also sounds like the ultimate reality show.
It really does. I was just going to say between the moon, Everest, and Mars, we have all the goals covered. But you two are an incredible inspiration, I think, for the people who are watching, and I think it's lovely to hear you give an assessment of your stories on risk. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to everybody joining the Google Hangout. We're going to wrap now, and thank you for your questions. To get closer to other National Geographic risk takers, you can have a look at our June issue, and we hope that you'll keep exploring with us. Join National Geographic Society at nationalgeographic.com if you want to learn more, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.